Basic underwater demolition SEAL training is the selection process for Navy SEALs.
It feels like you're on an island they control. They control the weather, they control the tides. And whatever they want to have happen, it happens.
And it is literally just 6 months of getting your ass kicked, being kept cold, wet, and sandy.
You're shivering all the time. So what starts to happen, your muscles are locking up from shivering.
And the evolutions get harder, the times get faster, the push-ups increase, the pull-ups increase, the runs increase, and times get faster.
You literally become primal. It almost becomes like, I just have to survive this.
Welcome back to Mulligan Brothers, and today I'll be listening to 3 Navy SEALs talk about buds, one of the toughest training and tests in the military that you can go through. They share their experiences, the lessons learned, and how to get through buds. Today's video, as always, was sponsored by Huel. I'm drinking Huel Black Edition, which has 26 vitamins and minerals, 35 grams of protein, and slow release carbs to make sure that I can stay satiated and proteined up whilst I make these documentaries. If you want to find out more about these, go to the link in the description. I'll talk about them a little bit later on in the video. But before that, here is the experience of buds from 3 SEALs. And yeah, it's interesting because, as we all know, it's one of the toughest things you have to go through in the military. Let's dive into it.
So when I joined, and if you talk to anybody who was in the special operations community, I'd say 90% of them, they join with a contract guaranteeing them a slot to buds. Like, you're guaranteed, you graduate this, pass this test, you'll go to buds. I didn't have any of that. I had nothing but waivers, and there was no guarantee, and I went to boot camp on a whim. Like, it was essentially a handshake deal. Like, yeah, when I get there, take the screen test like everybody else, and you'll pass it and you'll get through. And I was always kind of spiritual, not religious by any stretch, but very spiritual. And I'd do these deep meditation walks where I would just envision how cold the water was, what the sand felt like, what it sounded like, because I've heard buds in my mind a million times. I've seen the videos, I've grown up around it, and I knew what the end state was. I just didn't know all the different actual steps I had to take to get there. I knew we went to buds. I knew all the big pieces because I've grown up in it. And a lot of that was the unknown. Like, I know, but I don't know. I understand the finished article, what I want to be. I just don't know every single step to get there. And the unknown was hard for me. So when I went out to California, I was very different than most kids. I was very young. I didn't know anything. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a cell phone. I couldn't buy anything. Couldn't buy beer. Couldn't drink a beer. And I basically just sat there in that barracks room and just focused on buds. And it was not easy for me. My buds experience, as we talk about with like Cole, trauma is trauma for everybody. Difficulty that's a personal thing. What might be ultra difficult for you might be a breeze for me. I might even stress it. I can just do it. Buds is like that for a lot of guys. Buds is like that for Cole. Professional athlete, triathlete, an amazing swimmer. He cruised through buds. I didn't. My bud story was very, very different. And if I'm being honest, if I had to go through right now in the same condition I was in 2002, they wouldn't even take me now. You have to be such a physical phenom to even get orders to buds now that my whole trajectory would have been thrown off completely. And just by the time, the place, how young I was, how fast I healed, that's really how I had a leg up on anybody. Is I could get hurt the same way you could, and I could bounce back on Monday like it never happened. A lot of guys get hurt, and they just continue getting hurt.
What does a snapshot of buds look like? Like, how would you describe it?
From the outside looking in, it is a normal school in the military. They have a start time, they have an end time, they feed you 3 times a day. They have cadre that go home to their wives every night. I mean, it's a normal Navy school, but from the hours they have you, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like you're on an island they control. They control the weather, they control the tides. The sunset, they control it all. And whatever they want to have happen, it happens. So you'll wake up at 4 a.m. will be your first muster. You'll go do we'll call it a circle PT, basically out on a grinder, big flat top of pavement. The whole class will run in there. You have to run everywhere you go. You can't walk while you're in buds. You're always jogging no matter what. To catch you walking gets pretty bad. So you'll run in, you all get in formation, screaming, hooting and hollering, and some freak will walk out of that building, sipping a cup of coffee, and he's a physical phenom. At whatever it is he's about to do, he's the best at. I mean, we have instructors that can knock out sets of 40, 50 pull-ups. And I know people are like, no, you can't. There are people in that organization that will knock out sets of 25 and hang from one arm and wait for you to quit and just continue doing that cycle. They'll do 1,000 8-count bodybuilders, continuous, nonstop. 1,000 4-count flutter kicks, and they'll just drink coffee and talk shit while they do it. They're on a different level, and it's because they understand the process and they're not doing it every single day. So when they go on these runs, they'll get the fastest dude to set the pace, and he'll go down that beach at, 5.5 minute mile and cruise it the entire way. And you're blowing snot trying to catch up to him, and he looks like it's effortless. So they have this Herculean approach that you'll never be able to get there. You'll never be able to chase him. You're chasing greatness all day long is what it feels like. And then I understand the reality. Like, I know exactly what happens at the end of this course. I know exactly how that guy really is because I've got to see it. All these other guys haven't. I was like, it's not putting on a show, and in the moment, you never get to think that, like, I know this guy. Because a lot of the instructors I actually did know. They grew up with my dad, and I knew exactly who they were, but it's so different when you're in the moment. It's like, I can't say your name. I can't ask you a question. I am just stuck in this. And that goes on and on. You basically go from meal to meal, and the evolutions get harder, the times get faster, the push-ups increase, the pull-ups increase, the runs increase, and times get faster. So the whole time you're going through, you're getting more broken down, but you're getting faster and stronger, and they're showing it. So all the standards increase, which you could get away with 3 weeks ago, you can't get away with now. Now it's exponentially harder. And basically do that for, and how long the process is now? 6 months, 9 months, and then follow on training after that.
So training for buds, what was that process like? I'd never ever thought about it that people can Google it now. People can, I know it still doesn't prepare people, but a lot different. There's probably stuff on there now, and the advice that people receive probably helped so much. Back then you was going in blind.
I was going in completely blind all the way up until when I was in college, I met a guy that was several years older than me who had been in the Navy, and he had actually gone to Buds and tried to be a SEAL and didn't make it. And so I at least had him to kind of tap into and ask 1,000 questions. And he could tell me only that first 6 weeks out of 6 months that he was able to make it, right? And from that, I put together my own training program, which really consisted of a ton of running, as much swimming as possible, and body weight workouts. I would go to the gym, but I remember being told, like, the gym is going to do you no good. You're going to end up giving yourself some kind of injury. And when you show up to Buds, that injury will certainly come back. So stay out of the gym, keep your joints healthy, do a lot of body weight exercise, typical, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, run and swim. That's pretty much all I did in order to prepare for Buds. And then once again, all I had was that one person who had been there for a whopping 6 weeks to kind of guide me.
And what did it look like, the process? How was your experience with it?
Buds for me was a challenge every single day, but not because of a fitness or capability. It was mainly because anticipation and anxiety, right? You wake up every morning not knowing what that day has in store. And sometimes that can get the best of you, and that's where people end up just quitting. But I think I learned early on to just embrace that anxiety, embrace that anticipation, and just leverage it and turn it into energy. And that way you just keep on going no matter what the obstacle or the task that those instructors throw at you for the day. But yeah, I think some of those experiences as a kid certainly come into play, where I'd kind of been put in stressful situations early on. So you leverage those experiences as well to kind of get you through the rough points. And the rough points in Buds for everyone is different. Some people it's Hell Week. Some people it's pull comp. Some people it's just, being yelled at every day. It just kind of depends on the person.
So for a Brit, or someone who's never heard of Buds before, how would you describe it? What is it?
Basic underwater demolition SEAL training, or Buds for short, is the selection process for Navy SEALs. And it is literally just 6 months of getting your ass kicked, being kept cold, wet, and sandy, and never really having an opportunity to rest. And the focus is first very much physical, which ends up turning into a mental game. And then that just continues with a little bit of education, but really not. Any education you get is just so that it gives them a different way to torture you and drop the hammer and see if you've got what it takes. But ultimately, it is 6 months of hell to see if you can endure what gets thrown at you, see if you're mentally strong enough to deal with, crisis and complicated scenarios, and then and see if you're just see if you're good enough to be a part of that brotherhood.
Was there anything that stood out, like a specific moment in that process for you?
There were a lot of moments that stood out. I mean, 6 months is a long time when every day you're getting your ass handed to you. I think for me, where I had the most anxiety was when it was pull comp, which is a week of underwater stress tests, right? And I think it was exacerbated because of having that childhood experience of borderline lost at sea without a swim buddy and not knowing if I was going to make it home alive, right? And so when that moment came, when I'm underwater, you're on these old Jacques Cousteau rigs, twin 180s on your back, double hose regulator, old school systems. And they do that on purpose because you can pull that out and tie these big whammy knots in the hoses while you're going back and forth along the bottom, right? And while you're going back and forth, you don't know when the attack is coming, but it's coming. And you just keep going back and forth. The instructors are up there circling like sharks, and they're waiting for the right time. And that right time for them is when you exhale and all those bubbles come out. Then those guys come down and they literally beat you underwater, take away your air immediately, pull your mask off your face, tie the hose in a knot, loosen your shoulder straps, chest strap, waist strap, take your weight belt off. It falls immediately onto the bottom of the combat training tank, toss you around, slap you in the head, and then now you have to start solving your problems in a orderly fashion. Because if you get out of order, you fail. So you have no air, and now you have to start putting everything on in a specific order, right? So the first thing you do is get your weight belt. You lay it across the back of your calves so that it keeps you on the bottom. Then you try to find your mask. You get that on, and you're gonna have to clear your mask. But you have no air to clear your mask because you push on the front of your mask, right? Which opens up and loosens the seal around your nose, and you blow out your nose, the bubbles replace the water, and now you can see, right? But wait, you can't do that yet. So you need air first. So then you've got your mask and you're getting everything, you're kind of collecting it up to include your fins. And now you've got to take your rig, put it on over, put your arms through the straps, get your chest strap done. You've untied a knot that's in your rig, of course. You get air. Now you can clear your mask, put your fins on. Anyway, you go through the whole process, and then you just start going back and forth across the bottom again. And meanwhile, they're up there circling like sharks, and then they wait until you exhale again, and they come down and do it again. And they do it to you over and over and over again to see if you're going to quit, to see if you'll bolt to the surface. Because if you take off to the surface, that's considered quitting, right? So the anxiety for that moment to get in the water and start that test was overwhelming for me because I was like, oh my God, I was the part of, that experience when you're a kid to that point. Now I'm an adult, young adult, and I've got to just get through this. And then once I got down there and got going, it just kind of all went away. The anxiety went away. You kind of surrender to them. As soon as you get that first hit in the head, you just kind of go limp and you let them do whatever they want to you. And then you just remember the process. Okay, put this on first, do that second, do that third, and just get through it calmly. at least pretend to be calm, even though inside you're like, I want air, right? And then do it again, do it again, do it again. And before you know it, it's over. And they say, you passed. And you're like, thank God. But that's just one day in buds, right? And every guy has a different day where their anxiety is a little higher than others. And it just really depends on your own personal strengths and weaknesses and vulnerabilities, because buds will certainly find your vulnerability and force you to face it. And then when you face it, it can either take advantage of you or you can take advantage of it, and that's really what it boils down to.
When I've heard people speak about the military training, like at this extreme level, there is the physical side of it, which is, you have to be so fit, so tremendously strong, fast, healthy. But it always seems like it boils down to the mentality and like having that mindset and being able to deal with stressful situations. How much was it for you, mental versus physical?
The principle is that they leverage the physical beatings to ultimately break you down mentally. That's the whole point of the whole process in the military, whether it's a boot camp or when you get to, buds, which is considered one of the toughest selections in the world. They break you down physically, which then inevitably breaks you down mentally and emotionally. And I feel like every guy's probably got a different answer, but for me, the mental aspect of it was where I was strong, because I was physically 150-pound skinny runt. So all I had was this, and so for me, getting through whatever the test was of the day started here and ended here. Where a lot of guys, you had Naval Academy athletes, you have even professional athletes that stop what they're doing to try and become a SEAL. And you're surrounded by some of the greatest athletes in the world that show up to buds to see if they've got what it takes. But for me, I was just a skinny little punk from Texas, but I knew that I at least had this part somewhat squared away, and it ended up being my biggest strength. So for me, it was all started here, ended here, and physically, I was mediocre. I was middle of the running pack. I was at the back of the pack on the swims. I was okay at the obstacle course, and and anything that took that mental aspect was probably the only place I excelled, which there wasn't much of, there's no written exams where I could go, look at how smart I am, There was a couple of tests here and there, but for the most part, it was all physical. So all I had was the mental side.
Wow. So, and what was it like when you finally achieved it, when you got through buds?
Well, one of the unique things about buds is you are constantly kept humble, right? And so for me, graduating buds, there was no like, haha, look at me, right? Look at what I did. It didn't exist, because you knew like, wait, this is just the beginning. Like, I got a long road ahead of me. You've got to get through. For me, I was a medic. So I had to go get through the Army Special Operations Medical School. And I was like, holy shit, that's like one of the hardest schools in the military mentally. I knew that I had to go through advanced SEAL training, which back then was called STT, SEAL Tactical Training. And that's where you actually learn how to be a SEAL, because you don't learn that in buds, right? And then I knew I've got to then check into my SEAL team. And then I'm going to be put into a platoon. And it's the platoon that decides when I get my trident. So I still had a multi-year path to go before I was actually going to put on the symbol that represents Navy SEAL. So when I graduated buds, I knew, well, this is just the beginning. I have a whole lot of shit I got to do.
I hope you're enjoying this video so far. Today's video, as always, was powered by Huel. Huel has been an absolute game changer for me and my life. I love drinking their Black Edition. They're ready to drink. It has 26 vitamins and minerals, 35 grams of protein, and slow release carbs. When I know that I can just reach into my bag and grab a bottle of Huel on the go, it has changed my life. And as I'm training for the world's heaviest marathon right now, where I lift 220 pounds of weight for 26.2 miles, and then I do 450 miles with 70 pounds on my back, Huel has been my go-to fuel. Don't just take my word for it. The hardest geezer who ran the length of Africa also downs a couple bottles of Huel whilst he's on his run. So if you want to join someone like Hardest Geezer, or if you've just got a busy life in general, Huel can be an absolute game changer. Head to the link in the description where you can find out more about Black Edition and other products of Huel and some exclusive offers down below. Thank you to Huel for sponsoring the video. Let's dive back into the episode. When you was 17, 18 that you got into sort of the training of the military, what was that experience like, your first time? Did you know what you was coming to expect because of the family that you'd been around and stuff?
Yeah, and I did a lot of, thankfully, as I got closer, I found books. I read things. I was very fortunate. The first training school I went to in the Navy was here in the Virginia Beach area. The SEAL teams are based here in Virginia Beach. And the training school had connections to some of the SEALs. So some of the SEALs would come over and train us who were getting ready or wanted to go to SEAL training. And it was through the winter here in Virginia Beach. And they hammered us, which was good. And I loved it. I will admit, never once did I feel like, don't get me wrong, I didn't like the cold and things like that. But I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed training. I knew it was going to be hard, and I knew it was preparing me for that. I then, when I left that training school, there was a delay in going to SEAL training, so I got assigned to the East Coast SEAL headquarters. So I got an additional exposure to the SEAL teams at 18 years old, and getting exposed to this community. There were several of us that were there who were waiting to go to SEAL training. So they had training that we did, once again, reinforcing, it's the negative things in life. That's probably reinforced some of the ridiculous demons I carry. But I had a warrant officer, great dude. And he probably didn't intend anything like this, but he was like, "You're a skinny little runt." He's like, "You're never going to make it through training." He's like, "I want you to go down, and every day I want you to sit in the bay for 10 minutes. It's like the middle of winter. So the water temp's like, 38, 40 degrees. And I would do it every single day. I'd go sit in there. But funny, I think it probably created more of that perception, which just drove me even more to say, "I'll prove you wrong." But all of that, I will say, mentally prepared me. Like, it was no shock to me. I think for a lot of guys that go out to training, for whatever reason, they're not prepared for the level of shock that training does to you. It is designed to be mentally, physically, and emotionally overwhelming. It's purposely designed to be that way. It's purposely designed to be unfair. And a lot of guys just cannot wrap their head around that. And they're really good. They tee it up slowly before day one of training starts. So in the in-doc phase for like a month, you're kind of learning what training is, and they kind of act like it's hard, and it is hard. But not like when day one hits, it's like they hit you with a sledgehammer. And man, there's a mass exodus of people that quit within the first couple of days, just right out the gates. And I think those are the people that haven't been able to wrap their heads around, like, this is going to be really hard. And so for me, that was no shock. I was like, okay, this is what we expected, so let's go. So I think that was good. I don't think there was ever, I don't feel like there was ever a time that I was like, oh my God, this is so much exponentially hard than I ever thought it was going to be. I knew it was going to be brutally cold and it was going to be very hard. And I knew as long as I didn't quit, for the most part, I'd make it.
Could you paint a picture for somebody who doesn't know anything about what that training looks like the tougher days?
So, I mean, the toughest part of SEAL training is Hell Week. Hell Week is considered by many to be the hardest block of training in the U.S. military. We definitely have the highest attrition rate of any block of training, specifically in that week. On average, you'll lose almost 80% of the class will quit during Hell Week. And it is the pruning, if you will. It is the last, I don't want to say the last, but it is probably the biggest training device used in SEAL training to weed out the people who don't have the mental fortitude to endure massive discomfort and pain to want to be there, because they apply it in a myriad of really hard ways. Number one, physically demanding activity for Hell Week lasts a week, almost a week. I mean, it's about 5.5 days, so a work week, if you will. During that week, you get almost no sleep. You'll average about 3 hours of sleep. So probably 72 hours in, you're starting to hallucinate. I remember multiple times I was hallucinating during Hell Week. You're 90% of the time you are wet, cold, and coated in sand. So what's happening is you're chafing holes. A lot of guys chafe holes on the inside of their legs and their groin area and your armpits, on your neck, on top of your head. Not uncommon for guys, toenails and fingernails to fall off or pop off from just being wet. And I don't know what causes that, if maybe a combination of being wet and you're not like sleeping, so your body's not re-regulating. But those are all common things that happen. You're shivering all the time. So what starts to happen, your muscles are locking up from shivering. So now you're like locking up in pain from shivering. Hell Week's so bad that a lot of people will be like, oh my God, this is gross. I'm not the first person to tell this. Like, you'll let someone pee on you to try and be warm for only a few minutes. Like, you'll be huddled with a guy and he's like, I gotta pee. And you're like, dude, just do it, because that's how you literally become primal. It almost becomes like, I just have to survive this. But you also have to think. You still have to exist as a team. You have to get through the evolutions, because it's not like mindless activity. Everything is, you're accomplishing different things, from problem solving to navigating the obstacle course to doing a time run to doing swim, whatever it is. You're doing all these different things, but now you're doing it with the highest levels of stress, pressure, pain, and lack of sleep.
Is the week just cranking up the intensity as it goes along, or?
What's interesting is the week cranks up in the beginning, and then it actually starts to come down, which somebody had told me, and almost probably led me to almost quit, because, in this life, unrealistic expectations. By getting into Wednesday and Thursday, if you were to watch training and you watched those last couple of days and you would watch the first couple of days, you would say, they're not going as hard now. Well, some of that is just, it's impossible. You're literally guiding zombies, if you will, so there's a level of safety with the students that the instructors are making sure, hey, we're not pushing you so hard when you're in this mentally broken down state where, you could sustain injury. So technically, but in your mind, when you're in it, you feel like, it's funny, you think you're like chariots of fire running, like da, 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 da. You're thinking like, I am so fast on Thursday. And literally you're like a broken turtle.
So you finished the training, and I mean, what was that moment like passing?
All of SEAL training, or when I finished Hell Week?
When you finished, I mean, Hell Week specifically would be,
Hell Week was amazing. I mean, to know that I had finished it. I mean, Hell Week is the biggest crucible of SEAL training. I mean, there's still some other ones, and Hell Week is what bonds every SEAL. And there are frequent times that many of us have talked about that it was your ability to get through Hell Week that later would enable you to grind through the hardest moments in combat. And I would, my moment in combat became a mental, it was a focus on staying awake to stay alive. Like, I knew that if I let go and closed my eyes and went to sleep, I'd never wake up again. So in some ways that came back to those lessons. And I've talked to other guys that have been shot and in crazy situations where a will to survive and persevere is a really powerful thing. I mean, I think any paramedic or doctor can tell you when someone decides, we may not be able to stay alive indefinitely, but I guarantee you can stay alive if I take one person and give them exact same injuries and one decides he's ready to die, he will die very quickly. Whereas the other one, if they're fighting and fighting and fighting, they will live for a substantially long period of time, because it's amazing the power of the will to live and the will to overcome. And I think that's something that Hell Week and SEAL training teaches you. We thought it was going to be a quiet night. Saw some individuals run out of that house, and my boss came up to me and said, "Hey, let's wrap these guys up." We walked right into their ambush, right into what we call the kill zone, and literally they opened up on us. I took a round off my gun. I had my left night vision tube shot off. I thought my arm got shot off in the moment. The guys said they saw me stand up and turn and run to them when the round hit me from behind. It caught me right in front of the ear and traveled through. So they saw me fall in front of them and thought I was dead.